Now, somebody who is definitely above these kinds of antics is a friend of our show and an amazing voice in the conservative movement. And, of course, that is Mark Levin. He is the host of Life and Liberty. Mark, welcome to our crazy show.
I'm against those kinds of antics, but not these, right, Bobblehead? There's our Bobblehead, Joe Biden.
Oh,
there he is.
By the way, that was fascinating. I would actually say frightening. Sounded like a beehive, actually.
That's another good way to look at it. Exactly right.
That's a great analogy.
Exactly right. Well, Mark, we want to get your thoughts on the Democrats' closing argument, because Joe Biden has been about as useful to Democrats as that bobblehead on your desk. So they've deployed Barack Obama to make their final argument. He was in Philly yesterday. Here's a portion of what Obama said.
I understand that democracy might not seem like a top priority right now, especially when you're worrying about paying the bills. But when true democracy goes away, we've seen throughout history, we've seen around the world, when true democracy goes away, people get hurt. It has real consequences. This is not an abstraction. Governments start telling you what books you can read and which ones you can't. Dissidents start getting locked up. Reporters start getting locked up if they're not towing the party line. Corruption reigns because there's no accountability. People get hurt. There are consequences.
Mark, is he talking? He must be talking about Republicans, but he sounds a lot like he's laying out the case for what Democrats might do.
You know the old saying, when you point a finger at somebody, you're pointing three fingers at yourself? That sounds to me like the Democrat Party. But let me ask Barack Obama a question. How come, if you really believe this, Joe Biden hasn't called out the National Guard? How come, if you really believe this, you haven't moved your money offshore? How come, if you really believe this, you haven't sold one of your 5 mansions? How come, if you really believe this, you're not really acting like it? These people are pathetic. They're trying to destroy this country, divide this country, scare this country. They're desperate. It comes down to kitchen table issues, which is what they don't want to discuss. You want to know why? They have made life miserable for the average family in this country. They're impoverishing Americans. Americans are at each other's throats as a result of this kind of propaganda from this party. People need to remember, the only party that has tried to destroy democracy is the Democrat Party. We had to fight a civil war to keep this country together. Why? The Democrats and the Confederacy didn't want the United States anymore. We had to fight a civil rights battle for 150 years. Why? Because the Democrat Party didn't believe that everybody was equal. Despite losing the Civil War, they teamed up with the Klan. Even up till 1940, they wouldn't outlaw FDR, lynching. So let's talk about these things. I'm happy to talk about them with Barack Obama or Joe Biden or any of them. But when it comes to democracy being destroyed and the Third Reich and all the rest of it, these people, their rhetoric, on the one hand, they say, tone down the rhetoric. On the other hand, they keep bringing in the Third Reich and so forth and so on. Here's what I bet. And I will bet Joe Biden $10 million. I'll use American money. He can use his Chinese money. I will bet Joe Biden $10 million that come Wednesday, we'll still have, it's not a democracy, a constitutional republic. What do you say, Joe? And as far as Obama goes, does it really seem like he's worried about democracy unraveling in this country as he flies around with his antics and so forth? I would say to the Republican Party, we're very lucky to have Obama on the road because he's a loser. The fact of the matter is, 8 years of the Obama presidency, they lost 1,030 seats in the state legislatures and in Congress. So have him run around and so forth and so on. So to answer your question, this is really pathetic. These are the same people who call Republicans deplorables and white supremacists. I wrote it down. Insurrectionists, threats to democracy, racist, semi-fascist, roaches. Yeah, that's right. The Republicans out there are well known for burning down cities and leading riots and trying to overthrow the government. Oh, those are all those Republicans out there who are marching day in and day out. All those Republicans out there. What a bunch of crap. The Democrat Party has never embraced this country, ever. It's never supported Americanism. It's supported everything but Americanism.
Well, boy, Mark, I think you only left one thing off your list right there. You talked about the inflation and hyperbolic accusations all the way to cockroaches. The only one you might have left off was a threat to your children and your children's lives. Listen to Michael Beschloss, a presidential historian on MSNBC.
A historian 50 years from now, if historians are allowed to write in this country, and if there are still free publishing houses and a free press, which I'm not certain of, but if that is true, a historian will say what was at stake tonight and this week was the fact whether we will be a democracy in the future, whether our children will be arrested and conceivably killed. We're on the edge of a brutal authoritarian system, and it could be a week away.
You know, it's interesting you brought up, Mark, if you believe that to be the case, why haven't you called out the National Guard? It is interesting. If you believe that you're sitting on the edge of some existential threat, what wouldn't you do? You know, wouldn't you censor your political opposition? Wouldn't you call out the National Guard? Wouldn't you ensure, by any means necessary, that you would win an election? If you believe that's what's at stake, I don't know what you wouldn't do.
He's a perfect example of the corruption of academia. He's a so-called historian who gives advice to Biden, and he's not alone. What they're really upset about the Democrat Party is this. They expected, after Obama, that Hillary would take his third term, and Trump comes in and defeats Hillary, so they do everything they can to destroy him, and they want him out. Now they're working on DeSantis. They're working on other candidates, too. They don't want to lose this midterm. They know they have Biden in there 2 more years. If they can hold the Senate and to hold the House and maybe pick up a seat or 2 in the Senate, then our country will change forever. That is, the Supreme Court will change, the Senate will change, they'll have 4 more Democrats, our voting system will change. They will change this country forever. So what I have found out with the Democrats is when they use phrases and attack us, they're really describing themselves. It's the opposite of what they say. They create a Department of Education that's anti-education. They created all these other departments, a Department of Energy that's anti-energy. They have a Border Patrol that's anti-Border Patrol. And you can go on and on and on. They're good at propaganda. They're good at brainwashing. They're good at demagoguery. What they're not good at is managing the country. They've had 2 years unobstructed to run this country, and they've run it into the ground. You can't pick one thing they haven't destroyed, whether it's our border, whether it's our dollar, whether it's energy independence, whatever it is, they've destroyed everything. And so they need to be beaten. They need to be beaten badly. You have to ignore what they say and their media surrogates say. And one other thing, this guy, Beschloss, talks about a free press. We don't have a free press. We have a Democrat Party press. We have propaganda day in and day out. There's not a dime's worth of difference between the talking points that the Democrat Party put out and that the American media put out. They're utterly and completely corrupt, which is why like 90% of the American people can't stand them and know about it. If the free press is being destroyed, it's by the press today. It's by this generation of narcissists.
You know, Mark, you talk about, the left is talking about, and Barack Obama's talking about threats to democracy. And you're talking about what they'll do if they win. And I want to talk a little bit about what they have done to the idea of equal justice in this country, because they've weaponized the federal government against their enemies at the highest levels, whether it's Donald Trump, down to, American citizens protesting peacefully at abortion clinics who are being, dragged out of their home by the FBI and SWAT raids. So I think that's also on the ballot today. I talk to a lot of conservatives, and they tell me they're worried that they're the target.
And they're 100% correct. Look, I used to work at the Justice Department. The things the Justice Department are doing now are unconscionable, absolutely unheard of. If you look, they have weakened local law enforcement. They have no regard for local law enforcement. So the average people out there, they don't have security. They don't have safety. The crime is going through the roof, and they downplay it, the Democrats. On the other hand, they want to upplay Republicans that are a threat to the country and so forth. But notice they've empowered the federal law enforcement. So they've added 87,000 IRS agents. They're not there to investigate billionaires. They're there to threaten the average citizen.
That's right. So
that means they now have 160 or 70,000 IRS agents. Think about that. And they're not going to sit there with their shoes on the desk, you know, chewing gum. They're going to come after the people. The FBI is the modern Stasi. And I tell you this as somebody who's always supported them. And it's not just the top of the FBI, as the Republicans say. It's a whole culture now over there, and it's disgusting. And the Attorney General of the United States is completely corrupt and politicized. You look at the top 5 political appointees of that Department of Justice. They are radical Obama leftists. From the Attorney General to the Deputy Attorney General, the Associate Attorney General, every Assistant Attorney General, the Civil Rights Division, the Criminal Division. You look at the U.S. Attorney in Washington, who's going after Trump, going after the peaceful protesters who were involved in January 6th, going after documents, this Mickey Mouse stuff. You look at who he is and who his wife is. These are hardcore radicals that they've put in there. And the only way to begin to slow this down, is on Tuesday. And should we win big, and I would tell the American people, stop listening to this red wave stuff. Should we win big, and I hope it is, but you don't run elections that way, the Republicans are going to be held to account by people like us, because they better get to the bottom of this, and they better figure out how to do something about it. Because when Obama's running around saying we're going to lose our democracy, a man who's never believed in this country, a man who's never believed in this founding, a man who believes in the 1619 Project and critical race theory and all the rest of it, that should tell you that from their perspective, democracy means one-party rule,
yes,
iron-fisted control, and the politicization of federal law enforcement.
That's exactly right. Well, there's a reason why they call him the Great One.
That's right.
Mark Levin, thanks for joining us on this Sunday morning, just 2 days from the election. Okay, more, please.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Mark.
Goodbye, Joe Biden, I guess.
Take care.
Want to see more Mark Levin? Go to levintv.com and subscribe now.